Hello and welcome back to ELT Under the Covers. I am Neil of Team Teacher fame, and I am joined today again by my co-host, the weird, the wonderful,
Rockin' Rich.
Rockin' Rich. He's the
Pick it up, guys.
I love it.
That's right.
Today we are going to revisit something that we've previously visited before, Teacher Phensri. But just to let you know, we are English language teaching professionals, and in these series of videos where we react to teaching scenarios, we give our good and bad opinions about what's going on, our critique. Are you excited to head back into Teacher Phensri's classroom?
I'm very excited. I mean, last time it pretty much redefined how I went forward with language teaching. I learned so much. I also realized that I've been speaking English wrong my whole life.
Yeah.
But kids, we are language teaching professionals. Don't try this at home.
We don't want you to get hurt
at home. Don't try to analyze things at home, okay? We're professionals. We do this week in, week out.
Words hurt. Words. We should ban them. You need a license. Well, you do actually need a teaching license.
You need a license for that word. Do you? I don't know. You do some places. You don't all places, do you?
No. I wonder what that means. Like James Bond. License to teach. Just parachute into different countries. It's
quite scary, license to teach. I'm not sure if I like the idea of that. License to teach. It depends who's giving out those licenses. It can get a bit 1984, can't it?
Yeah, I guess.
You've got a license for teaching that to those children? Hello. Do you have a license, mate?
Hopefully it's just like this person's passed a criminal background check and they've got a certain amount of education. Not that they are formally in line with governmental educational. This is what you got to teach.
This person hasn't said anything which goes against the party line. Unlike Teacher Phensri.
No, Teacher Phensri says it as it is, quite literally, if I remember correctly. So what we're going to do with this video is she's going and teaching English in the classroom again, but this time she's teaching how to pronounce English names of celebrities. And a lot of these celebrities, I don't know how to pronounce their names, so maybe I'll learn something. So let's cue that up, let's line that up, and then let's get going.
That a bit loud.
No, it's fine. Oh, this one's got no English subs, I don't think. I'll translate. He says, stand up for the teacher. Sorry, my Thai is pretty damn good. How are you?
Thank you. Sit down, please.
Yes, baby, come. Thank you, teacher.
Sit down.
Did he say thank you, baby, come?
I don't know. I think I need to hear that again.
Go back.
Please.
Yes, baby, come. Thank you, teacher.
Sit down.
Can you turn it up again and play it again?
Really?
Yeah,
third time.
Turn it up.
If you isn't that how you get your channel banned off YouTube? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sit down, please.
Yes, baby, come. Thank you, teacher.
I think because like it's one of those words that translates. Remember in Spain, when you're talking with like all the local guys that talk with the girls are always like, hey guapa, and like hey pretty or beautiful. One of the ways that it translates into English with these sort of I don't know what you would call it, like sweetheart names or whatever, cat calls. I often come across people saying, oh, hey babe, and stuff like that to be familiar. Or the other one is like I think I mentioned in a previous video, people saying hey bro or hey friend or brother.
Bruh.
Brother, I get that a lot with like the more Indian community or whatever. Do you know like these sort of words? But so I don't think he means baby come in the way that we're taking it.
Right.
In that disgusting route, but more in just
Right.
oh, hey, beautiful, come in the classroom kind of thing. Maybe
Yes.
I'm excusing his pedophilia.
No,
now.
I think it's possible. It's possible. It was obviously a gag though as well, wasn't it? So I don't really know exactly what's going on there. I do know what you're talking about though. That is an interesting subject. I mean, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? That like, like in Spain, how they would say "tío,"
Yeah.
which means uncle. But if but they use it like man, right? But then if you go to English, you can't be like yo uncle. But actually, some people do. The Pakistani community say that a bit.
Yeah.
Hey uncle, So yeah, but
Well,
then
it's
that's
the same
obviously a
with
translation, isn't it?
like Jamaican and West Indie and kind
What,
of
with mon?
African. You call
mon.
you don't say no, not mon like.
No, not mon.
You say like
mon.
an older person, like an older woman that you kind of know. You call her auntie, for example.
Auntie.
You say
Yeah,
auntie,
right.
and
That's
she's
true.
like she's not your
She's
actual
not your
aunt,
real
but she is
auntie.
a kind of like a term of respect. Or like in Korea, you say ajushi or ajuma for just anyone that's an older male or female that you don't know, but you're kind of like, it's kind of like sir, but they don't say sir, they say literally like uncle or something like that. It's interesting.
Or how like loads of Spanish people call their mum like gordita, like little fatty. It probably wouldn't go down well in English, would it?
No. Hey little fatty. Hey little fatty.
Happy Mother's Day, little. Doesn't work, does it? Doesn't work.
No, but it's funny because it's one of those things that it's a nicety in their country, but then they try to translate that nicety to to English, and it sometimes comes across as being creepy. But also, in the other way, the English do it the other way around. Like we will go. I remember being in Spain, and I'm like, puedo, podría. Podría pone, or, I'm like, can you possibly please give me a beer or something? And people are like, why are you making these weird, esoteric, hypothetical situations? Do you want a beer or not?
Yeah. I think the worst offense I ever committed with that is I said, podría tener una bolsa, which means, could I have a bag at the supermarket, right?
I remember
but
that.
In Spanish, it means something like, it means something like, would it be possible, or can I have your permission to have possession of a bag, is what it means in Spanish. So they're just like, what the hell? like I'm not your mother kind of thing. Whereas,
yes.
you have,
in Spain, and then you get knighted or something.
Yeah, right. In Spain, they say, dame dos bolsas, give me 2 bags.
But then often you get people that don't translate that to English. So they're just walking in to, like a bar. Give me 2 beers. Or give me the beers. Or give 2 beers now.
Put me 3 beers, porfy.
It's funny. So I kind of think as English language teachers, we're also, you're having to do kind of like culture checks of, like
as
kind of how to be polite
as well.
and stuff. Whatever language that you're teaching.
Yeah, teaching or learning. I think if you have any kind of relationship with languages, then culture becomes hyper important, doesn't it?
Yeah, and awareness of your own culture, and awareness of actually kind of your own language, and how you, for example, what we're talking about now, how you show polite, or you show, I don't know, like almost a deference for someone that's in a higher position than you, or It's interesting.
Yeah.
But this is not what this video is about. This video is about how to say names, hopefully.
Yes. I don't know. How do you say Leonardo? Is it Leonardo DiCaprio? Okay, let's find out.
ไปเล่นกันไงวิชามันก็เลยไม่ติดตัว
ครูครับนี่มันวิชาอังกฤษของครูอรวรรณนี่ครับ
ครูสอนแทนคุณครูอรวรรณมานานมาก จนวิชานี้จะเป็นของครูอยู่แล้ว วันนี้ครูจะพานักเรียนทุกคนอ่านชื่อคนคำแร
I love
ก
how she's got a
Oh.
Union Jack
ผิด
book.
ผิดตรงไหนครับครู
ไอ้คอนเนอรี่เนี่ยถูก แต่ชื่อเนี่ยอ่านผิดคำนี้น่ะอ่านว่า
I think we know.
ซี
Anwar is answer, I think. I'm going to start using that in my
ฟุ
class.
ตบอลนะครับเนี่ย
นั่นมันซีดานจะบ้าหรือเปล่าเนี่ยซีอ่านคอนเนอรี่อ่านพร้อมกัน1 2
See.
3
ซีแอนคอนเนอรี่
คำต่อไปค่ะเลอาร์ตอ่านค่ะ
คริสเตน
ผิด
I love how he says it.
ถูกโอเค แต่นามสกุลเขาน่ะไม่ใช่ นามสกุลอ่านว่าสเตวาร์ดคริสเตนสเตวาร์ดพร้อมกัน1 2 3
คริสเตนสเตวาร์ด
คำต่อ
It's it's I love how she writes it as well. I think one of the things I love about this is the sound effects, you know, all that kind of stuff.
They're like one step away from going full Japanese, Korean, you know, where they start to actually color people's cheeks. And you know, like they do the tear, the single tear, and like the smoke coming out the ears. It's full on like Looney Tunes. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's lots
Or the
of fun.
flapping of the arms. No.
They do good reactions as well, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
At least she's like kind of writing the translations as well of what she's trying to teach.
อย่าไปอ่านที่ไหนอีกนะอายเขานั่นเนี่ยมันผิดตรงไหน
ไอ้ทำไมครับครู
คนที่ไหนเอาเรื่องช่องคลอดมาพูดกันนะฮะคำนี้นะว่าจีน พอดี้ แวน ดัมมี่
ตีโง่นี่เสร็จเลย
Do you ever see when she reacts when they say it and it's wrong and she's like, hey! You know, whatever. Like, do you ever catch yourself acting like that or reacting like that when your student gets something wrong?
When
You're
someone
like,
says
no,
wrong,
damn it.
and I'm just
Well,
like,
to the extent, yeah, to the extent, to the extent where it's actually bothered you bothered you enough that that your annoyance is coming out. Oh, damn it.
No, I don't get annoyed by mistakes. I cannot think of a single instance where I've been annoyed by mistake. I get annoyed by interruptions or, you know, like poor behavior in class, although I try not to show that. But if they make a mistake, for me, it's always an opportunity. And it's not an opportunity. It might not be like, oh, I need to revisit this and pause all the class. It could be just a single, you know, raising the eyebrow like the Rock. So they kind of like, okay, I did something wrong. I need to kind of correct it. Or I'll repeat it back to them, like.
I have to admit, I'm
Sean Connery.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can end up going, if they're not very, you know, quick on the uptake, it could end up us two just conversing with a name. Sean Connery. Sean Connery. Sean Connery.
It's a classroom culture that you have to build up, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first time that you do that kind of correction, they might just be like, "What the hell? Why is he saying the same thing back to me?" But you know, by the time you've taught them like 4 or 5 times, they tend to have a good idea of what you expect, and also whether you permit other students to come in and have student-to-student correction as well, which some people do and some people don't. Or you know, I personally am not massively keen on it until I like to be the one who opens it up. So you know, I'm trying to correct someone, they're not getting it, and then I open it up by body language, gestures, and all the rest of it.
I knew a teacher that had like a paddle, like a ping pong table tennis paddle, and they would put like a red X on there. And if there was a mistake, just raise it up, and other people would be like, "Oh,
Yeah, I know there's that kind of stuff, and people have take it one step further where they can have like a G for grammar or P for pronunciation, and there's so to help them with all these on the spot correction things. I would like
an air traffic controller.
Well, I would really like to see someone doing that well, because I'm pretty sure it can be done very well, and then I'd sort of assess the benefits and drawbacks of it, because I'm not 100% convinced about it, and to be honest, I'm not. Error correction, I think, is such a can of worms. Like, it's such a massive can of worms, and like. I think it's something it's very tricky to get to the bottom of what is good error correction and when to do it.
Yeah.
And I do in my classes, I do loads of delayed error correction. I do tons of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of error correction I do, it doesn't solve the problem. They make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Some of them, they don't, and they start catching themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I find as well is that you get those students who are good at that, and they maybe benefit from like 70% of the errors that you point out to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're like catching them and doing autonomous correction and stopping themselves and but then the ones that just don't seem to benefit at all, like, it's just no matter what you do, you just can't seem, you get those students that are just constantly making those same fossilized mistakes. Like, I've got a student who says fierced. I think I've spoken about this before. Fierced instead of first, right?
Oh.
Fierced, and it's the fierced option, right? And I have corrected that about 35, 40 times with this guy. I've been teaching him for like 4 or 5 months, right? And I've tried spending time on it. I've tried going through the reasons why, we've done like world, bird first, seeing the patterns and going through it again. But it just doesn't stop and do that reflection when he's talking, to be able to do that, to be able to go, and catch, because you have to be ready to catch it. And if you're not ready to catch it, you're not going to self-correct. And if you don't self-correct, you will not fix those errors. So it's a real tricky area, and it's almost like I believe it's an area of teacher mastery. That if you get to that level where you can fix, errors or errors, errors, where you can fix errors, because mistakes are one thing, but errors are another thing. Mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Errors, yes, being able to fix errors for everyone, I think that is an area of teacher mastery, and I'd love to see someone who can really do that well. I know lots of people study this in their masters and stuff like that as well. I know someone who did like a dissertation on it for a master's, and she even said she didn't have the answer. She didn't know what's the answer to how do you get all the students to take in the errors. Don't know. So I found that fascinating, that someone who studied it as a dissertation in their masters also didn't have the magic pill.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole lot of psychology behind it as well, because it might not even just be to do with language learning. It could be, as you point out, they just maybe they don't have reflection in their language learning, but maybe they're just not a reflective person in general. Like, they don't think about what's going on in their life, kind of mistakes that they've made, or they don't even contemplate or realize it. It's kind of like, when you have someone like we were talking about earlier with being polite, where they try and translate exactly their language to English, but they're not even aware that the components that they're translating over, they're not aware that they're saying could you do this to be polite. It's just, that's how I've always done it. So it's a whole big bag for them, because they kind of have to learn a whole bunch of skills on top of learning a language. So, that could be one of
That's
that.
true.
I think definitely there is learning is a skill, and part of that is reflection and looking at your own errors. I would even go as far as to say that is a skill in and of itself.
Well, that's definitely true, Neil, and that's one of the biggest justifications or rationales for presenting and teaching language differently to young learners, is that they don't have the analytical skills of an adult.
Yeah.
So all this grammar analysis that you do with adult learners, it makes no sense with young learners, because they wouldn't be able to understand it even if you presented it in their own language, and they were doing it about their own language, because they don't have those kind of they haven't developed those rational skills yet, where they can actually analyze something. It's a skill that you develop through school.
Yeah. Well, some develop through school. So some can make it out. And it only develops to a certain degree. I mean, when we're talking about critical thinking, and especially in the day and age that we're in now, I mean, we're in the internet. I'm stuck here. No, I'm actually in the real world as well. But I'm on the internet, through this podcast, and all this information is out there. It's more important than ever of a skill to learn critical thinking and analytical thinking, because you're just inundated by information. And if you don't have the ability to process that, to segment it, to consolidate and, differentiate what is factual, what is, fiction, what is all the mix, then it's just an overload. How are you supposed to, deal with all this, and how are you supposed to deal with this world? It's crazy. And it's crazy that, that we've got a whole generation growing up with that, and I'm very intrigued and curious as to what my kids and this generation of kids coming up that are of the internet age are going to be like, because there's going to be a transition part where they have this part of the past where maybe there's not so much growing up, there's not so much focus on analytics and critical thinking per se, because there wasn't so much of a wealth of information. The information was what was presented within the textbooks. But now kids have got access to everything. Whatever they want, they can search for it on the internet. And yet they probably have access to that before they've been taught those analytical skills at school. So I'm very intrigued to see how that's going to end up. Is that something that you've ever thought about?
Yeah, it's very difficult to predict the future, isn't it? Especially with something so complex as that.
Yeah.
I think we could big picture wise, there's not really much that we could talk about it and discuss it, but it's not really we can't really have any massive effect on it.
No.
But what we can do is think of ourselves as being speedboats of change. This is from a Jeremy Harmer talk, actually. Little speedboats of change. So we have our own ideas about, how education should be and the best way of carrying out education with this technology that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we can pivot and all the rest of it and adapt, rather than waiting for the big hulking entity that is the government or the global order or whatever to determine what the best option for the human race is in terms of education or whatever. And we can do our own thing, and that's something that's kind of in the back of my head, actually. I have kind of a weird fantasy that I haven't really thought about that much, and certainly haven't got the resources to pull off at the moment. But
I would actually go as far as to say being language teaching professionals, we're actually in kind of a unique position, because I do think what we've got with the internet here, sharing information, it is almost it is a lot of communication. It is almost like there's a language, and I think what we're going to see with the future with kids is they've grown up within this internet language way of communicating, and there'll be a whole set of, let's say internet grammar rules. They're not meaning grammar as in kind of like the syntax and language structure, but there's going to be like informal rules and stuff of how you navigate the internet and how it works and stuff like that before it is even formalized. So I think there's probably already something is already established. There's a way of navigating the internet via communication, but we've just kind of, it's not, as you say, been meddled with by the government in a way.
When you say navigating the internet via communication, do you mean how people communicate with each other? Or do you mean
how people communicate with each other, how people put information on the internet, personal information, how they receive it, how they take it in, what's the best practices and stuff. It's like a developing language in a way.
Yeah, there's massive elements of language in there, isn't there? Even in the very early days of the internet, one of the first things I learnt when I was very young when I first got on the internet. I think 11. Wow. I had a 14K modem or whatever, like a super slow modem that my dad got, and he was like, "Get on the internet," and he just like away, no filters, no adult blocking settings, none of that. No, it was just Rich with his computer in his room on the internet at like 11 years old, and my dad's like, boom, go out there and explore. So obviously I come across all kinds of weirdos, but one of the things that I learned very quickly, maybe my first day even, was the thing about caps, that caps is shouting.
Yeah,
because I didn't know that, and I don't, that wasn't a thing back then. No one understood that.
Yeah,
and I was just typing in caps constantly, and then people were like, "Why are you always shouting?" I'm like, "What are you talking about shouting?"
Yeah, but where did that come from? There was no formal process to decide on that. It just evolved, and that's why I'm saying, it is like there is an internet language, and it's kind of similar to how English came about, in that it was just spoken to communicate hodgepodge different parts of languages thrown together. And it's kind of almost like a free market, a democratic language, in that it's just evolved out of just use and necessity. And then, people like us come along and be like, no, the comma goes here. So, I wonder what that's going to turn out with it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, haven't we? That's the kind of evolution of language versus standardization.
Yeah,
that's
we keep touching on it. Stop touching it, but it's interesting.
Well, it's important, because without it, there wouldn't be such a thing as English or any language. Without standardization, you wouldn't have any language. You just have language, like the universal, and it's all different blobs of it. You'd have, dare I say, a spectrum of language, which you actually do have. You really do have a spectrum of language, but that's not very helpful for students, is it? To say, oh yes, well, you're on the spectrum of English. What does that mean? And am I speaking it well? You're speaking your English well.
Well, I think Teacher Phensri is definitely on some spectrum. I think maybe she's at the other end of the rainbow. She's found the pot of gold. I think she's the pinnacle, if there is a pinnacle to the spectrum. I imagine the spectrum like a rainbow. I don't know why. Just like a curve, not like
spectrum is another word for rainbow, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
เลยนะครับครู
นี่เธออย่ารู้เยอะสิจีนคอดี้แวนดัมมี่ทุกคนอ่านพร้อมกันค่ะ
จีนคอดี้แวนดัมมี่
ดีค่ะคำต่อไป
คนนี้เขาร้องเพลงเลิฟมีไรอยู่ดูเลยนะคะ
อ๋อ
ชื่อเอลลี่กูริงค่ะ
เทอมหน้าเธอย้ายห้องเถอะ
อ้าวทำไมครับครู
นี่ครูให้โอกาสเธอแล้วเธอก็ยังอ่านผิดอีกนะไป
แล้วหนูต้องอ่านยังไงคะครู
อี
มันต้องหลีตรงไหน
หลี โก ดิ้ง
ครูหิวลูกชิ้นเหรอครับผม
ไม่ด่ะทำไมเธอเรื่องตึงตังแบบนี้ฮะ
อ้าว
มันไม่ได้เกี่ยวกับลูกชิ้น อ่านพร้อมกัน
อีหลีโกดิ้ง
อีกครั้ง
อีหลีโก
Funny
ดิ้ง
thing is though, the girl initially got it wrong because you know she's adding the vowel at the end. I think it was like she said like illegal linga. You know she adds that. Oh, hold on. Let me say that
Strong
again.
voiced.
So even the girl at the beginning, she did that kind of wrong because she add the vowel at the end, adding a voice at the end, just saying li golding ha or or whatever. Yeah, because
Right.
it's just that kind of language quirk that a lot of Asian languages have, where they don't like ending with a hard consonant.
They don't. Well, there's a few things about that. One is that not all languages have the same voiced and unvoiced consonants. So I could try to think of an example in English here because I'm pretty sure we have. Yeah, like for example, in English, we don't have a voiced H. So we have, but we don't have ha. Like that's not a sound in English.
Yeah.
Right. We have for H, like hello,
But we don't.
but we don't
say
have
hello.
ha. We don't. But we don't have a huh. Well, I'm not saying about we don't say hello, but I'm saying that we don't actually have a sound that's a huh.
Yeah.
So in some languages that it's like that. Like for example, they might only have t, so they don't have a d. They just have t.
Yeah.
So that when they have a d sound, they'll just say t, or vice versa, as
Yeah.
is happening in this case, where yes, you might say g, whereas we just say ing, but they don't have an ing. So the nearest sound that she has is a g or whatever. So she's saying ing instead of ing. And the other thing that can happen is that where we define the convention of what is voiced and unvoiced can be different, like between English and Spanish. So a voiced consonant in Spanish sounds like an unvoiced consonant in English, but they also have voiced and unvoiced. So they can have t and d, right?
Yeah.
But their d is only very slightly voiced. It's not like even like that. I just did it wrong. It's something like or something, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in English we're like duh, right, with a big
Yeah.
So where those conventions are defined can change, and that can mix things up as well. So you can find a situation where when you learn another language, you start to realize that a sound before that you could actually say as voiced and unvoiced, now there's like 3 levels. There's like unvoiced, somewhere in the middle, and then like super voiced or something, right?
Yeah.
And you learn that as you learn more languages.
I don't often feel like that gets touched upon enough as well. I feel with pronunciation, it's very much the Cinderella of language teaching and language learning, in the sense that it never really goes. It's very shallowly touched upon by many. You don't often go so deep into the voiced and unvoiced and have many lessons focused around that. It's always kind of like structure, vocabulary.
We'll have to take a look at Adrian Underhill in the future.
Definitely,
And,
definitely.
because
Because he's
that's-
going to
that-
come on the show. Isn't that right, Adrian?
Hopefully he is, if I can get in touch with him. Yeah, it'd be great to have him on. I've got an idea actually. I can email. Well, anyway, I've got some ideas. So
I love it when a plan comes together.
yeah, I think it's the thing that any teacher that do go on and do a diploma or a master's even will get much more heavily into phonemics, and a lot of them become sort of phonemics fanboys. right? Like me, I'm a bit of a phonemics fanboy. And you go through different stages of that. I don't think it's so necessary to dive in. Well, I personally don't necessarily dive so heavily into actually learning phonemics in class.
Yeah.
Although I know that Adrian Underhill, for example, does. He teaches it like that. I did for a long time, but I've come away from it a bit. But I do love talking about these things, voiced and unvoiced, and I do think it helps the students. And I think, diagrams of the mouth and understanding what voiced and unvoiced is, getting them to do the so they know what voiced is and what unvoiced is, and playing around with things like that, all building all this awareness and all these skills. It's so useful for students because once they understand these things themselves, then they start to get a bigger grasp on it. And at first they might be like, what's this? Is this particularly useful for me? But they get convinced of it fairly quickly, especially if they actually give it a go.
Especially if it helps them become clearer with their communication, because I get a lot of people that you speak English well, yet they still feel like they're not understood or they're having to repeat themselves, and that's often down to phonemics and their pronunciation. They could be perfect, but I've got a lot of, they're not even students, but Indian friends, and some have very heavy accents, and I try and help out and say, well, you do, it's not dime, it's time. And especially with these sounds that are very, that occur frequently in English, and it just makes a huge difference, because there's it's not just about communicating, but there's a stigma that comes along with it as well, where if you say, even if you speak perfect English, but it can be heavily accented, I don't think accented is the right word, but where there's a lot of, say, issues with the phonemics, that native speakers think that you can't speak English, which can be quite strange.
I think the stigma goes beyond that, because accents, all kinds of accents have all different kinds of stigmas. In fact, every accent has a stigma. Even the prestigious ones have stigmas, because some people dislike them for being prestigious.
Yeah, that's true.
Or dislike them for other reasons. Lots of people these days dislike RP, even though it's still probably the most prestigious English accent in the world.
Yep.
Even in the US, it's probably overall, although there's some people who dislike British accent, overall it probably holds more prestige than standard American, which is also.
And funnily enough, it's almost an accent that you don't hear in England, because there's so many different regional accents.
Well, yeah,
but, there's no one that's going out there that's.
Yeah.
The majority of population is just speaking pure RP.
Yeah, it's a platonic idea to some extent, but standardization always is.
Yeah.
But what you will find though, Neil, is that people go to university and kind of their accent changes a bit, and then they become an English teacher and their accent changes a bit, and like we're not speaking RP right now, but maybe we're speaking closer to it than we were 12 years ago.
It's true.
So
I've got old videos of me. I'm gonna go down to pub.
Do you want to go down the pub for a few bevies? Should we have some bevies, la?
All right. All right.
Go into university next week.
Now then.
So that would have been 20 years ago when I spoke like that. So okay, but so there's obviously some approximation towards some idea of a standard. So yeah, and I don't fight. We've had this conversation a million times. I don't necessarily fight hard against that, because I think you sort of need a standard for there to be a concept of a language. I don't really, people can speak it any way they want, but at the end of the day, something has to be the standard. And if it's not, then how do we agree on anything? We start having these meaningless arguments about, or not meaningless arguments, but rather not very pragmatic arguments about, what to call this and what to call that and what this word really means. We already do have those arguments, but I think it's better that there's some sort of a standard to settle those issues, rather than just say, well, everyone can say it their own way and we'll just sort of hope it all works out, because of course it won't. It'll either split into different languages or it'll remain standardized. That's what happens. Yep. Languages actually very quickly split. It doesn't take a long time. You separate a community, a tribal community that used to speak the main language, and their languages diverge into different languages very quickly, maybe a generation or two, not that long a time. So without that standard, then that's what would happen, right?
The multiverse of madness with.
So the other thing I would say as well, going back to the point of the benefits of sort of diving into what we were talking about, like pronunciation issues, is something maybe a bit more complex, which is that I think when you speak a language kind of that's been influenced by your own language, so in kind of a wrong way. So for example, you're trying to say all these, as you put it, hard D's or whatever in English when they're not there, or whatever the situation is, you're putting the wrong sound in there, basically. Like when Spanish people and a lot of Romance speakers, when they read English, and they will say computer, right? Yeah. Rather than computer, then it actually becomes harder and more clunky to say it. And I always like this is why I got the guitar, because I always like the musical analogy of learning languages. Learning an instrument, I think, is very much like learning a language. When I first learned guitar, I held the pick like this. I don't know if you can see it with my fake background. I can't see myself at the moment. Yeah, I held the pick. I held the pick like this. So I used to play the guitar like that, holding the pick like that. Right? Which I can't even do now. But I used to be able to play quite well like that. Yeah. But I didn't realize until I really looked into it, maybe 18 months after playing guitar, the correct way of holding the pick is like this. Okay? Like that, with your thumb and the picks here.
So right? Rather than holding a cookie, you're holding a key that you're about to turn.
I don't even know if it's a key exactly. But anyway, the point is there's a specific way of holding the pick. And like, you can't tell as a beginner that it's advantageous to hold the pick like this. Yeah. I would have had no idea. In fact, when I first did this, it felt so weird. And it was really difficult. Like, what happened is, while I was playing, my hand would like naturally start doing this and start to hold it like that. But, after some time, eventually I did it like that. And now, I can easily see that this is the best way of holding the pick. Yeah. Right? Holding it that other way, like I say, I can't even do it now. If I try and hold it that way, my wrist feels all weird and I can't do it. But it definitely is better. It definitely allows you to play quicker, more accurately, right? It's the same thing with this mouth, this thing what we're talking about. If you're doing, there's lots of areas of pronunciation where learners have issues that actually hinder their fluency and actually make it more difficult to speak the language. Yeah, they're making it more difficult to speak the language. Areas where they're over pronouncing, like the computer, the fact that they might not be using weak forms. The fact that they're not aware about, assimilation and, all the other ones, elision and whatever, where the letters disappear or they change. Or with handbag, we say ham bag. We don't say hand at all. We say handbag. Yeah. Because the N and the D get morphed into the B and it becomes handbag, right? All those things, and learning those things is useful. Because not just for the point that you were just talking about the stigma and about the, being more comprehensible, but also because it's easy to say. Yeah. Handbag is difficult to say. Handbag is easy to say. That's why it happened, actually, because you say the lips come together and you get that bilabial bag, handbag. Yeah. So it works. Mm-hmm. So that's, kids, that's why you need to teach your students about pronunciation.
perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. And it's just, I think, as a teacher and as a student, it's just at what point I think it becomes, well, what point do you need to change it? And I think generally it's if it's a hindrance.
Yeah, if it's a hindrance.
If it's a hindrance, because sometimes, you know, accents, you're perfectly fine, you know. But if it's a point where it's stopping communication, or it's stopping, you know, maybe it's hindering your learning, then, you know, that's the point you kind of maybe want to deep dive a little bit more into it and and
if
correct
it limits how comprehensible you are, or it limits your fluency, then definitely it's worth dealing with. If it gets you to be stigmatized by some or a lot of people, then I believe that's your choice whether you care about that or not.
Yeah, because it can actually start to become an identifier for you. You know, if we think about, you know, they're talking about famous people in this classroom, you know, say we talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger, he has some words that where you might be like, oh, what did he say? But most of the time it's actually to his benefit, because he's very distinctual of his voice and how he speaks, and even it doesn't even have to be non-native speakers, you know, people like Rowan Atkinson and Alan Rickman that had speech impediments now have
That's a
very
good example.
they have very distinct ways of speaking, which people really admire or love, and it became to their benefit.
See, I was going to say Brian Blessed, but I guess it's not a speech impediment. My name's Brian Blessed. Welcome everybody to Brian Blessed class.
But like with Alan Rickman, I think, well, he had a problem with his jaw, so he always kind of speaks without opening his mouth as much, and you know, without that you wouldn't have the Potter.
It's so interesting. I didn't even realize that he had a speech impediment. I thought that was just something he put on.
No, it's because of something to do with his jaw.
Okay.
I know Rowan Atkinson had a stutter, and that's why he tends to overpronounce things, you know, like Bob.
Right. No way. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because I thought it was more like the Clint Eastwood thing, but I assume he doesn't have a speech impediment as well. But I know he was defined as an actor in the early days that he used to like spit his lines through his teeth.
Yeah.
He used to be like, "Make my day, punk," or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that is a speech impediment or not now. Now I'm sort of thinking about it. Maybe it is.
It starts to become part of your identity, and so that's why I always tend to try and tread lightly, and you know, make sure if it's not something that it's hindering them, and if it's just something where it's kind of like almost a quirk, then it really is their choice.
Yeah, I think it's important to make those kind of issues a choice. If it's just to do with a potential stigmatization, it does have to be a choice, because like I said before, anything could be stigmatized. You know, you've probably come across those students actually who speak really, really, really posh English, and sometimes it sounds a bit, you know, stuck up, you know. So you got to be careful, you know, because they probably put a lot of effort into getting that really nice hello, have a good day sort of accent, but can also be a bit like, who is this guy?
Yeah, well, I suppose
chill out a little bit.
And you know, even with stuff that hinders kind of somewhat broken English, if it's they're happy with the level that they've got and they don't want to learn anymore, I don't think you should kind of push someone. Like for example, remember that wrestler Iron Sheik? His English is kind of broken, but he really embraces it. And you know, the way that he communicates is very funny. Funny as in hilarious. Not that I'm laughing at him, but because of he knows what he's saying is kind of a bit off, but he does it in a fact, you know, he embraces it and it became part of his identity. So you know, I'm fine with it. It's just, you know, it's kind of, it's always down to the student, and it's always, is this something that you want to fix, or is it something that you're quite happy with? And you know, people take it in the way that you say, you know, that maybe they want to present a new persona, or have their because you know, maybe they're speaking posh because that's how they speak in their language, and they want to be able to get to that equivalent because they're not perceived as posh in English. So it's a whole bag of cats.
Yeah.
Should we finish this up and see what other names she butchers?
นายด่ามา
อดัมแซนเลอร์
ผิดแอดแอมแซนเลอร์
เป็นพี่ชายแอะแอะแซนลี่ป่ะครับผม
เธอตลกแล้วล่ะเก็บความตลกไว้ที่อื่นที่นี่ครูจริงจังทำไมถึงเป็นแอดแอมนี่ไงนี่อ่านว่าพร้อมกัน
I'm just gonna use that in class.
อันนี้ต้องสนใจหรอกเขาดังเขาชื่อตรงนี้เขา1 2 3
แอดแอมแซนเลอร์
อีกสักครั้ง
แอดแอมแซนเลอร์
ถ้าครูมีลูกคนที่4ครูจะตั้งชื่อลูกครูว่าแอดแอม
What do you think about that with the names? You know, they're your name, so it kind of feels to me that a person should pronounce your name as you want it to be pronounced.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, even I think if they're addressing you, and also if you get bothered by it, so someone's addressing you, you know, and you're bothered by the way they say it, then I think you have the right to sort of say, hey, you know, could you try and say my name like this instead, right? But if they're not addressing you, first of all, I think people can say it any way they want, and you know, whatever, you know, whether people call me Rich or Richard or Richie or Ricky
Rich
or whatever the hell, Rich, or Chad,
Chris.
Hey, Chad, Chris, yeah, crispy Chad. So you know, if I'm not there, then what the hell? That's nothing to do with me, is it?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have a choice really. And even if I am there, it's only a matter of politeness that they can choose to address me in the way that I asked to, or even attempt to, because you know, I remember in Spain, everyone reach, you know, and it's like you stop correcting that, you know, because you know, I could no, it's I mean, teaching the they might not even be ready to learn it. If I'm in a beginner's class and they go reach, I'm not going to be like, no, my name is Rich, because they'll have no way of saying that. They won't be able to say the they won't be able to say the you know, and the ch at the end will be hard enough. So you know, you have to put up with it, and I think in real life people have to put up with it as well. You know, you don't have a right to force someone to call you something. I'm getting very political here. You don't have a right to force someone to call you something. You can only ask out of politeness for them to call you Mr. Smith or whatever you want to be called. Okay.
Please stop referring to me as Rico.
Yeah.
Nail. I kind of feel like you'd like that.
Nail. I mean, lots of people called you Nail. You didn't mind in Spain, did you?
All the time. Yeah. I was mostly Neo in Asia.
Neo. Well, that's pretty cool, isn't it? That's like
I know. Like, I'm the one.
It's an upgrade.
Yeah, it's an upgrade from Neil. I get more shit for being a Neil in an English-based country. Neil?
Yeah.
No, I meant sit down.
I've had some people from Asia, like when I'm doing a class with them, the first class, they start calling me Sir Rich, and I'm like, okay, let's chill out on the Sir Rich stuff. I usually flip it to Teacher Rich, because that's formal enough that they feel comfortable, and that I feel comfortable that they're not like, yes, my Lord Rich, Sir Rich. Yeah. Exactly, and that's a similar issue, really, isn't it? It's negotiating your form of address with the person you're communicating with.
Yeah.
But you know, if we go back, look at the football example. You know, David Villa. You know,
Yeah.
instead of David Villa. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and then sometimes they start to say it right, don't they? Like, but it's still not right. Like they'll call him like David Villa or something, you know, which again isn't right, you know. So it just becomes this constant thing of, you know, well, so I don't know. I don't really know where I stand on that.
On English words that have been adopted, from other languages, should we keep the English way of pronouncing it with how you would pronounce it in English, or do you keep the foreign? For example, like croissant. I say croissant, but some people say croissant.
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, a brilliant example of that
Bagel
might
or
be lieutenant and lieutenant.
Ah.
Whereas in the US they say lieutenant, which is how it looks in English.
Yeah.
But we spell it the same, but we say lieutenant.
I've been saying it like an American.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a northern thing. But the correct British Army way of saying it's lieutenant, but you spell it the same way as lieutenant. You know, the L-E, you know, whatever. So I think that's just it's a convention. And as with all the other times we've talked about this, I'm somewhere in the middle between standardization and describing the language. So I think we do need to describe how people speak. We need to allow for some evolution, you know, but on the other hand, we do need the standardization as well. So it's a bit of an elitist position in a way, which I'm not comfortable with, because it kind of puts an institution like Oxford or Cambridge in quite a high position where they get to be the arbiters of what gets standardized and what doesn't.
Yeah. Maybe often it's kind of the crowd that you're playing to. Maybe, you know, for example, with Villa, you know, like you would say David Villa maybe now because more people are aware of it, but you wouldn't just go and say, oh, I'm going on holiday to my Villa in Spain. You know, you'd say, oh, I'm going on holiday to my villa in Spain.
Yeah. You know, you would say paella, wouldn't you? An English person wouldn't know what a paella was.
Yeah.
What's a paella?
Yeah.
Paella? Did you just have a fit? What are you saying, right? Oh, no, paella. Oh, right. The rice thing that the Spanish eat. Yeah.
I've done that before, and sometimes I feel pretentious when I've you've done it by accident, you know, because with the paella, I love paella, and paella. I can't even remember how to say it.
When people used to ask me like where I live in Spain, I'm like, yes, I live in Valencia.
Yeah.
And they're like, where? Valencia. Valencia.
Oh yeah, and then I go to Barcelona.
Exactly. So yeah, conventions plus standardization.
Or Ibiza?
Some people say Ibiza, don't they, or something?
Yeah,
but
like, that's
weird,
kind of like that's too far the other way.
It's just, I don't know.
But you people butcher English as well. Papi, yeah, papi. What are you talking about? Papi, you puppy.
Yeah, right. Oh, have you noticed some people have started to say iron instead of iron?
Iron instead of iron?
Yeah. Have you heard that? Iron.
I've never heard that. Is that a thing, or is that just is that because of the Key and Peele stuff that we watched, you know, with the Aaron?
I don't know if it's like a bit of a meme. I can't tell, but a lot of like internet influencers say iron, right? Like PewDiePie says it, right? A lot of the Hololivers say it. They say iron. Even the English ones, right? Which is what is making me think, like, are they doing it just as a meme because all of the non-natives say it, or is it actually changing?
Maybe it's poking fun of Americans because, you know, they say Iran rather than Iran.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the metal. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
they still say iron, don't they? Do Americans say iron? No, of course not. No, they say
Do they?
iron. Yeah, they definitely do. Iron has been the correct pronunciation for like the last century or so. I can't speak for before that. I don't know where this iron thing's coming from, other than the spelling.
Moscow. I always get.
Moscow. Yeah.
I always have this image of my head of just like this moss-covered cow. Like, it's Moscow. I'm pretty sure
Moscow.
Russians kind of say Moscow as well. A Moscow. I'm like, what is a Moscow?
I quite like that though. It's quite funny. Iraq. Apparently there was a thing. They did a linguistic study about that, and the hawks are the ones that say Iraq, and the doves are the ones who say Iraq.
Oh,
In
really?
the US. Yeah. They did an analysis of how people use the word in the House of Representatives, and they found out that if you were for the war, then you tended to say Iraq, and if you were against it, you tended to say Iraq.
So what did they derive from that? Was there kind of like a...
Just that linguistic differences can be related sometimes to political differences.
Well, I think it kind of touches on what we were talking about with kind of like around stigmas or how or identities. You know, if you kind of
it totally is.
You're trying to sound posher, you have a certain idea in mind of how you want to present yourself to the world.
But here's an interesting one as well. They tried to have a look at the same thing with Brexit and Brexit, and they expected to find something similar. That if you were pro, you said one; if you were against, they found another. They found no correlation. There's no correlation between accent, area, class, political standing, whether you're for or against it. And the only thing they found as a common thing, everyone says it about the same amount of time. It's like 80% of the time people say Brexit, 20% of the time they say Brexit on average, right? The only thing they did find is that people thought that the other side or the other were the people who said Brexit. So Scottish people thought that English people said Brexit. English people thought that Scottish people said Brexit. Brexiteers thought that Remainers said Brexit, and Remainers thought that Brexiteers said Brexit. So we always thought that the other says Brexit. So that's a really interesting one. It was the course director on the course I was doing who actually did that study. But yeah,
that's really interesting.
Linguistics, yeah.
Well, you know, I think that's, I mean, you know, having a little bit of background with kind of like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and kind of also counseling and stuff like that. There is very much a correlation between the language that you use and your psychology. So it's just interesting when it overlaps with linguistics, and they're not one thing. That it's all part of a complicated web, and that's what makes teaching language learning very interesting, you know, for myself, because there's so much. There's a rabbit hole that you can really go down, and you know, it kind of feels like have you ever seen the Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme with Charlie, and he's got all the strings doing the conspiracies, and he's got like the strings matched up to all the different pictures on like the big cork board, and he's like, this is how it all connects.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how it feels like sometimes when you're teaching a language, where you're like, they just ask a simple question like, well, why do you put that in there? And you're like, well, that's an interesting question. Let me just tell you about this. And then 10 hours go by, and you're like, oh, and so that's how English was formed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's all Inception.
It is.
That's yeah.
It's a Taco Bell within a mall within a Taco Bell. I love that South Park episode. It's fantastic.
So I think we need to wrap up.
Yes, we do. So if you really like that video, here's a question for you. What are you going to do about it? Answer. You subscribe, you like, and you share, and you leave comments. You leave comments to say what you want us to look at next. Do you want us to look at more Teacher Phensri? Or do you want us to look at something else? Do you have some response to what we've been talking about? Maybe we can have a video about that, and we can have a little live stream, possibly. But we need more subscribers for that. So, get on that subscribe button. I've been Neil of Team Teacher. If you want to see my stuff, go to teamteacherchina.com, where I have all my PowerPoint lessons that you can download and use straight away. Team Teacher China YouTube channel, where we have videos that correspond to those lessons. Team Teacher Baby, with my journey as a teacher and as a father, and also Team Teacher English, where I put those PowerPoint lessons into home self-study videos that you can use wherever and whenever you want. And Professor Rich has big news about stuff that's coming on with his live streaming.
Yep, so youtube.com/Professor Rich, weekly live streams for language learners. If you're a non-native who's watching this, do weekly live streams, currently on Sunday afternoon British time. Been streaming for about 45 minutes to an hour. All questions attempted to be answered about English and teaching. If you're an up-and-coming teacher who wants to ask some questions about language teaching, then I'll take those as well. And I am actually offering some private lessons through Professor Rich now, which is the first time actually I've ever done that. So you can go youtube.com/Professor Rich to get those live streams. You can professorrich@gmail.com if you have interests in the private lessons, and we'll set up a level test. I'll send you over the info. Then you've also got other channels which I'm not doing a great deal with right now, but possibly will be in the future. Profich Gaming, you can expect some live gaming streams to go up on there some point. I'm thinking about doing like a 24-hour stream or something, seeing if I can pick up some subs. 24-hour stream, 24-hour drinking stream. I'll just be there with the 2 bottles of vodka and just get through them.
While playing Le Mans.
While playing
on Dreamcast.
Minesweeper. I'm going to play Minesweeper for 24 hours. It's the ultimate gaming channel and challenge. And then finally you have, well, that's it, isn't it, really? Is that it? Do I have something else? This channel. Make sure that you like and subscribe to ELT Under the Covers. And any language teachers pass this on to them. We're a breath of fresh air. We're like the cool and up and coming kids. No stuffy academic stuff here. We're just experienced, qualified English teachers who happen to be exceptionally talented and good looking.
I couldn't say it better myself. See you later, folks.
All right, bye-bye, everyone.